Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
My friends, the radical left has turned a tragedy in Texas, this murder trial and conviction of Karmelo Anthony. They have turned this in to a political and racial fight in Texas. And it is a sad, sad story, and I want to talk about this, my friends, today. So, thank you for tuning in to the Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. You know, I have been looking around the world, looking around this country specifically, for the left's version of conservative, not bitter. And I got to tell you, I run into a lot of people who are on the unhinged, godless, radical left on social media. And the bitterness and rage that is coming from these folks, their keyboards, because most of these folks wouldn't say this stuff to anyone's face. But it's unbelievable where we are. It really is as a country. I don't expect people to agree with me on all political issues here. They certainly should, but I don't expect uniformity of agreement on everything. What I do expect, though, what I do hope for, is that we have a nation that has not gone just completely wicked and evil, swatting their political opposition, which is part of this story between the victim's family, the Metcalf family, who their son was brutally murdered by Karmelo Anthony a little over a year ago. And we'll go through all this. We'll go through the facts. Both families have suffered tremendous losses here. This is sad, but the jury has spoken, and they have said that Karmelo Anthony is guilty of murdering a young athlete, stabbing him in the heart. And we'll go through this, my friends. Someone has lost the Metcalf family has lost a son, a brother. He has a twin brother. It's terribly, awfully sad. And instead of empathy from the left, we see more politicization and just radical responses. And I want to go through this because this is the sort of thing that is ripping. We talk about what's ripping this nation apart. It's this sort of stuff, this sort of behavior, claims of racism here, and just general hatred towards the Metcalf family from these insane, deranged lunatics and supporters of Karmelo Anthony. And we'll go through this, my friends, in just a moment. Forgot here to grab something off the computer again. But before we get started, maybe you've reached that stage where managing your money feels like juggling more than just numbers. There's tax planning, estate work, investment choices, and a whole lot more. That's when Family Office Services can really make a difference. Full Suite Wealth brings all those pieces together with advanced option strategies. This is all into one cohesive strategy, by the way. They bring together a coordinated team who can help with advanced option strategies, with private equity, credit, legal expertise, all those things, my friends, under one roof. It's about simplifying your financial life, planning for the future, making sure your legacy stays strong for generations to come. If you're ready for that next level of support, head on over to FullSuiteWealth.com today. That's FullSuiteWealth.com. Build your legacy secure your future. So let's go through the facts of this case, the Karmelo Anthony murder case, where he now is found guilty of murdering Austin Metcalf. So he was convicted. Karmelo Anthony was convicted of murder by a jury in Collin County, Texas. The jury rejected the claim made by the defense team that Anthony acted in self-defense. The judge handed down a sentence of 35 years in prison. There was this was never going to be a capital offense, meaning there would be no death penalty sought here, because at the time of the murder, the defendant, Karmelo Anthony, was 17. He was tried. They took the death penalty off the table. Let's just keep it at that as we move along here. So self-defense was rejected because self-defense means that there would have been a not guilty verdict. That was the result. So here are the facts as we know them. On April 2nd of last year, 2025, Austin Metcalf, who was 17, was attending a high school track meet in Frisco, Texas. Karmelo Anthony, who also was 17 at the time, was present at the same event. So there was a rain delay at the track event and the track meet, and Memorial High School, which is where Austin Metcalf attended, they had a team tent. So they were gathering under the tent, and witnesses say that Karmelo Anthony was also under the tent. He was not part of Memorial High School, but yet he came over and took up space underneath that tent. So people saw, envision this, if you were a high school athlete, and you had a member of the opposing team under your team's tent, they said, "Look, this is not for you. This is our team. You need to leave." And that's what witnesses say happened. They say, "Look, this is our tent. This isn't for you. I mean, you can this is not your space. This is our team's space." And it was testimony. Witnesses said that Karmelo Anthony refused to leave the nearly 15 times. It's estimated by some of the witnesses that he was asked to leave about 15 times. And each and every time he refused to leave. So then things escalated. A verbal confrontation followed. Testimony then indicated that there was an argument between Karmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf. It lasted, according to what I can gather from just information from the trial, 4 to 6 minutes. So about 5 minutes. There was a verbal confrontation, as I understand it, between the two, and it became physical at some point after that verbal confrontation. Witnesses have testified that Anthony warned Metcalf, "Don't touch me." So here we have, again, the tent for Memorial High School. You have Karmelo Anthony basically coming in and using the space. The team says, "Hey, man, you're not supposed to be here. You need to leave." They asked him 15 times. He refused. This escalated. Austin Metcalf finally got over and said, "Listen, you need to get out of here." There was an intense verbal exchange between the two. And then it was reported that Metcalf pushed Anthony. It was at this point in time that Anthony pulled out a knife and he stabbed, according to testimony. These are now facts established by the jury. A jury of his peers has agreed with this, the prosecution's version of events, witnesses' testimony. Anthony then stabbed Metcalf in the chest. And Metcalf, Austin Metcalf, the 17-year-old high school student, died from the wound. In fact, I've read that the knife actually punctured his heart. According to testimony at the trial, Karmelo Anthony said, quote, "He put his hands on me. I stabbed him." A responding officer testified that Anthony later said, "I'm not alleged, I did it," basically confessing to stabbing him. So the entire argument revolved around self-defense, and this argument was rejected by the jury. So here's what the prosecution argued. Prosecution said, look, Anthony refused several repeated requests to leave an area that he was not supposed to be in. Anthony's refusal then escalated the actual confrontation that he had with Austin Metcalf. Metcalf's shove did not rise to the level or justify any use of deadly force. Anthony's use of the knife, of course, constituted that it was murder. The judge had said that the jury could consider manslaughter, but of course the prosecution says this is murder. This is what happened here. He murdered a 17-year-old kid over this whole thing. So the defense, however, says Austin Metcalf is the one who initiated physical contact, that Anthony feared for his safety, and that his decision to stab in the chest and kill Austin Metcalf, they said, was an act of self-defense. The jury rejected the defense theory. They found Anthony guilty of murder. And of course, a jury consists of 12 jurors plus alternates. So let's pause there for a moment. Those are the facts as we know them. Now, what have I left out at this particular point? I've not talked about the race of the victim. I've not talked about the race of the of the defendant at trial. Now convicted murderer, Karmelo Anthony. I haven't mentioned their race, their ethnicity. I've mentioned their age, and I've mentioned their age, and of course the fact that they're both 17-year-old track athletes. I also haven't mentioned the race of the jurors, but I'm going to do that now because of what else has happened and transpired. Because, well, everything is reduced to race in the minds of the godless radical left. So, Karmelo Anthony, the defendant, he is black. Austin Metcalf, the victim here, who was murdered a little over a year ago, he was white. The number of black jurors on this final jury was 0. There were no black alternates, according to what I've found in reports as well. The defense challenged the prosecution's removal of 3 prospective jurors through the jury selection process. And so this, of course, turns into a racial situation because of this. Let me pause here. I've shared before that I served on a jury. I served on a jury It would have been in May of 2018, so a little over 8 years ago. I don't want to make this about me. I'm trying to share from what I've seen as a juror, what my experience was, and how this process works. So jury selection process. Now, there could be variations in certain counties and parts of the country, but in general, what happens is you get a notice in the mail and say you got to report to the courthouse for jury selection, and they give you a time, and you show up, and you have to go in, and whatever cases need jurors at that particular time, you're basically assigned a number, and then they take the first 12 people, they put them in the jury box, or maybe there were 14 because we had 2 alternates, but regardless, they take the first 12 or 14 people, you get in to the jury box, and the prosecution and the defense begin to ask questions about of the jurors to figure out who they want on their trial. Of course, both the prosecution and the and the defense are looking for certain types of people. So, for example, I remember sitting there directly next to a person, and he was asked, because in the case that I sat on, where I eventually was chosen as a juror, it involved the death of a 5-year-old boy. We ended up convicting the defendant. It's a long and lengthy story, but it wasn't a murder trial because prosecutors knew they were going to have trouble identifying whether the mother murdered the 5-year-old boy. It's terrible stuff, by the way, or the live-in boyfriend. And so the charges were conspiracy to commit murder. There were other charges, but that was, I think, the primary charge. But regardless, there was a guy next to me in the jury box, and he was asked, what is your opinion of someone who's charged with harming a child? And he said, I believe that they're guilty. If a child makes an allegation, then that's what happened. So obviously the defense said, well, this guy's already telling us effectively that my client, as the defense attorney, the defendant here, is guilty of murder without hearing any of the evidence. And so, of course, the defense wanted to say, look, we don't want this guy on the jury. He's not going to be fair to my client, to the defendant. And so the people were struck down. You have a certain number. I don't remember the number, but both the prosecution and the defense could choose to have a potential juror struck from that jury based upon, there's reasons. You can't say, well, this gets to the point here. There's reasons and rationale given. Sometimes certain professions, sometimes people are looking for a certain gender. They're looking for people who, the defense wants people who really can be fair. The prosecution, they're looking for things to help their case. And so the jury is eventually selected. And so it's reported here that there were 3 jurors who actually ended up into the pool, where they were, at least temporarily, if that's the way you want to look at it, on that jury. That's not technically, but they had a spot unless one of the either the prosecutor or the defense attorney decided that particular juror was not going to be chosen. They were going to challenge that juror. And all 3 of these black prospective jurors had been removed at the prosecution's request. Prosecutors say that the jurors were removed from the jury because they were educators, not because they were black. Prosecutors said that educators might view school-related incidents differently. So it makes sense, the thinking as to why they wouldn't want educators on the jury. But nonetheless, prosecutors, the judge accepted this as a race-neutral line of reasoning for selecting particular jurors or challenging particular jurors on the final jury. The judge denied the defense's challenge to this, and the final jury contained 0 black jurors and 0 black alternates. So that's where I probably need to pause this as I'm looking at the clock. So that's where we end up. So Karmelo Anthony found guilty by a jury of his peers, guilty of murder. The jury did not buy the self-defense argument. I mean, the argument was about, according to testimony, the argument was about Anthony leaving the tent. The confrontation existed because he was in the tent, and the victim, Austin Metcalf, had watched this go on for several minutes, and he refused to leave. He wasn't supposed to be there. So the jury reasonably concluded that, hey, this, all he had to do was walk away. If he would have walked away and not been where he was, this incident would have stopped immediately. So that, my friends, is where we're going to pause as we prepare to take a timeout here on the program. Before we do that, though, let's talk about something that is important. That is your money. You worked hard for it, but is it working hard for you and what you believe in? At 48 Financial, they specialize in biblically responsible investing. That means they screen out companies that do not align with your faith, your values, and they'll help you create a plan that fits your goals and your purpose. The best part is that they'll show you how your current investments, what you have today, you don't have to buy anything new, what you have today. They will show you how that stacks up against your values. Do your investments align with your values, or do your investments run contrary to your values, or somewhere in between? Well, this assessment, which is quick and easy, will help you get the answer to that question. All you have to do is head on over to 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd. 48 Financial, helping you align your money with your mission. I know that what we're talking about here today is heavy, my friends. It is sad, no matter how you look at it. It is tragic. It is awful. But we'll continue going through this on the other side of the break. But right now, I've got to take a timeout. You're listening here to Conservative, Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Talking here about this verdict at the Karmelo Anthony trial. This has become, because, well, I'm going to be as fair and reasonable as I know how to be here. Because of the information I've shared with you, namely the race of the defendant, who's now the convict in this particular case, and the race of the victim, and the race of the people on the jury, this has now become an issue over race. Again, there were no black jurors. The victim is black. Excuse me, the victim is white. The defendant is black. And so this, of course, for the people who view the entire world through the lens of racism, make this about race. And it's not just that they make it about race. It's not just that they have questions about it. It's not just that they're bothered. I understand to some point. I try to be fair-minded as best as possible to the people with whom I disagree. I don't agree. I see no evidence that any of this had anything to do with race, at least insofar as the jury made its determination here. But everything is amplified through the racial lens. And perhaps the most troubling to me, as I've watched this, or followed what's happened and read up on it, that sort of thing, is as you watch this unfold, to me, what is most problematic is that it's assumed by so many people that a jury that consists of 12 white people, well, I shouldn't say, I don't know that definitively, but a jury that contains no black people cannot find justice for a black defendant. This I reject completely, 100%. Justice means that you follow the facts of the case. I've laid them out. Now listen, we're not on the jury. We can have opinions, but as one who sat on a jury, I will tell you that there are things that you first of all, you get all the information. Second of all, you live with this weight for the entire time of the trial. The trial that I served as a juror on, we were not sequestered. We could go home every night, but we were strictly instructed not to consume any news about the case that I served as a juror on. I know that there was at least a short little blip of it. I don't know if it was before or right after the trial or whatever, but I'm People Magazine or People.com. I remember seeing a link to that. So it's reported. There are things that are reported in certain places. And so the idea is, hey, if things become impossible to, if a case becomes so popular and talked about to where you can't go out in public without people wanting to talk about it, or you seeing stories in the news, and then that potentially leads to pressure on the jurors to, you're getting external pressure from people in the community and all that. That's when juries are sequestered. We were not sequestered, but we were instructed not to consume anything or read anything about the case and so forth. We were supposed to get all of our information from the arguments made in that courtroom. And, but we were in there. We were in there for almost 2.5 weeks. In fact, it was the Tuesday after Memorial Day of 2018. That was the final day we reported for the trial. They made closing arguments that day, and we began the process of deliberating sometime late in the afternoon or early evening of Tuesday following Memorial Day in 2018. And we actually didn't come down to our final verdict until after midnight. So it was actually Tuesday morning. I don't know, it was maybe 1, 2 in the morning, some such thing. And tensions were high. And I'll tell you that I was the last person to make a guilty vote, which might surprise some of you. The defendant, if it matters in our case, was white. The victim was a white young boy who had autism. It was a terrible trial, I mean, you saw pictures, of course, of the boy. You saw, you had reports of just how they were harming him. You saw search histories of what the mother and or the live-in boyfriend were searching. They were looking for ways to basically to kill this boy. I mean, it was awful for nearly 2.5 weeks. So the weight of this is different when you're sitting there every day. You get to know a little bit over that length of time the people on your jury. You can go to lunch together and that sort of thing. You sit down during times of rest, in the room, and just you just get to know each other, and I would say that you've bond over this in a way. I mean, it's terrible. I remember for me the feeling was I want to be fair to Stephen. Stephen was the victim, or sorry, Stephen was the defendant, and I wanted to be fair because we have a very important role. That role is to say, as a jury of his peers in the community, the only explanation is effectively the only reasonable explanation for what happened that night is what the prosecution has argued. Therefore, you are guilty of these charges. And so I wanted to be fair because the defense attorney at the very beginning told our jury, look, you're going to hear bad things about my client. My client's not a good guy, he basically said. But my client's not on trial for being a bad guy. My client is on trial for these specific charges. And so you have to look past your disdain and maybe even hatred for this guy, justifiable though it might be, to get to the truth of the matter and to see it as objectively as possible. So I took that very, very seriously. And, you also see how quickly some people are prepared to say that he's guilty. And I'll be honest, that made me pump the brakes a little bit more because I took this seriously. I studied our system of justice and the Constitution. Those are the things that interested me. Those are the things I talked about in school. Of course, I have shared that I was at one point considering law school, so I'd gone through, at least like a pre-law program and different stuff like that. So I was just careful. I wanted to be fair, but I also wanted justice for that boy, and I'm sure that these jurors wanted these things as well. You want justice for Austin Metcalf. He's no longer here. He's no longer here. His future is gone. His twin brother is going to be a twin brother with no brother to grow old with and to be friends with and to stay close in his family with. He's gone. The parents lost a child. The aunt lost a nephew. The community lost a young man who had a promising future. This is sad. You want justice for that. That life was taken away because of the actions of Karmelo Anthony. But you want fairness, and you want to hear, is there any reason that he had to pull that knife to protect himself? And the jury said no. What could have helped him more than anything was just if he just left the tent. And it wasn't because of his race, and it's not because of the race of the other guy. And it's sickening to me that we have to come here each and every time. And we're not looking at the facts of the case, and we're not looking at these objectively when this is all-consuming to people. Absolutely all-consuming to people. The race of the victim, the race of the defendant, the race of the jury. Justice is, Lady Justice is blindfolded. She's holding the scales, and she's not looking at anything other than just listening to the facts of the case. That's how this is supposed to be done. And it is absolutely true that a jury of white people can be fair to a black defendant and vice versa. By the way, these things are not mutually exclusive. Gotta take a time out here. And I'm going to share during that timeout or in the next segment some of the things that the family said during sentencing here of Karmelo Anthony. Friends, if you're curious about Kratom, just trying to figure it out, who you can trust, let me encourage you to check out Christopher's Organic Botanicals. They are a family-run company. They offer natural, lab-tested Kratom, not that synthetic garbage that's given Kratom a bad name. Real Kratom is responsibly sourced, it's tested for purity, and that's what Christopher's is all about. They work directly with farmers in Indonesia and follow the same traditions that have been trusted for generations. There are no gimmicks, there are no shortcuts. There is only a clean, honest alternative for people looking for a more natural way, I should say, to support their health. Start with their Kratom Starter Pack. It's a great way to begin. Coupon code ToddHuff saves you 10% on your first order. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I told you I wanted to share some of the comments or a summary of the comments made by family members of Austin Metcalf, the victim who was murdered by Karmelo Anthony. They made some comments, as families are allowed to do, at the conclusion of a trial. And I want to talk about that. And I want to talk a little bit about the mayhem and the chaos and the radical, insane lunatics out there who only see the world through race and who use that just, I'd say, sickening viewpoint where there's no humanity in this. It's only about the superficial differences between people. And they use that. They use that to, to cause harm and hurt to families of victims, to tear apart communities, accusing racism where there is no evidence of it. This stuff is sick and disgusting. And they also caused potential trouble. They caused trouble. Could have been much worse than this potential trouble for the Metcalf family, because these folks who are stirring up this whole racial discussion and making this about race had caused the Metcalf family to be swatted. We talked about this in the past, but swatted 6 times, my friends. Swatting is an attempt, ultimately at its core, to get someone, the person who you're having swatted, it is an attempt to get them harmed or even killed. What you do is, just briefly, you make a frantic call to 911, or you make some allegation that something violent happened. You hear fighting, you heard gunshots at a particular residence, and you're just making this up. You call 911, and you know that the SWAT team is going to be sent. Of course, you're making all these things up. So you do this at night, the family's sleeping, you send the SWAT team in, and the hope is, as sick as this is, the hope is that they'll bust down the door, and in the confusion and chaos, maybe the person at home thinks he's being attacked by a home intruder, grabs a weapon, SWAT team kills him. That happens 6 times to the victim's family. This is sick and disgusting stuff. These people who do this are the problem in this country today. Jeff Metcalf, who is the father of the victim, Austin Metcalf, he stood repeatedly demanded at sentencing that Karmelo Anthony look him in the eye. Anthony, who had the audacity to stab his son in the chest, in the heart, could not look his father in the eye. And Jeff Metcalf told him several times, "Look at me in the eye." He reported, Jeff Metcalf, that Austin's death, their son's death, destroyed who he once was. He said, that person's gone. He doesn't exist anymore. This case, he said, is about justice. It is not about race. All these folks out here who want to profit and benefit from divisions and racial allegations are the ones that are stirring this up. This is not about race. Metcalf is reportedly to have said, I don't care if he's purple. This isn't about race. Megan Metcalf, the mother of Austin Metcalf, said, you should feel lucky you got 35 years because I've gotten a life sentence without my son. She said that Karmelo Anthony stole the family's future, which, my friends, he did. She said that Austin was a peacemaker. Hunter Metcalf, the twin brother of the victim, Austin Metcalf, said Austin was his best friend. Of course, he was his twin, someone whose loss has fundamentally changed his life. You know, being a father with 3 kids, we have a son, a daughter, 2 daughters. So I usually say son, daughter, daughter. And it's, I guess when you're a younger parent, maybe it's just me, I don't know. But we change, right? We age, we change. And I have to tell you, I tell my girls this because they'll fight with each other. And I'll say, you guys are in a position to be best friends for life. You guys should be best friends. There's a couple of years between them. They do a lot together. You know how it is. You fight with the people you're closest to and all that. There's layers to this, right? There's the immediate loss of your son, right? The tragic event, he's gone forever. Then you start to think about the other child. He's not going to have a friend, that best friend. This is a twin brother too. It's not I'm not saying it's okay if it's not a twin or just a biological sibling. But there's I think an extra closeness a lot of times with twins. And so he's lost that. It's gone. And all these people on the other side want to talk about is race. And I think that's pathetic. I think that's weak. Look, if there's actual reasons to believe that this is racist and that the jurors were just out to get this guy because he was black or whatever, then okay, present that. But don't just make these wild claims when it has nothing to do with the facts. And then on top of that, these lunatics, because they're stirred up by people. Listen, I encounter these people every day on social media. They are deranged. And it's not a mental thing. It's a condition of the heart. It's a condition of the spirit, my friends. We're in a spiritual war here in this country. Evil persists. I gotta go. But don't give up hope, my friends. SDG.